Hello, everyone, and welcome to our spring alumni virtual panel, Maintaining Recovery Practices Year-Round. I'm so glad you all could join us here this evening. Before we get started, and to give people a little bit of extra time to join, I do want to go through a few announcements. So, to get us started, I will want to make sure everyone knows about our upcoming virtual alumni reunion, Continuing Connections and Anniversary Reunion. This will be being held on Saturday, June 7th from 10:30 a.m. until 3 p.m and is a great chance to reconnect with fellow alumni throughout the Renfrew Center, as well as our staff from the residential locations, both at Spring Lane and in Coconut Creek. So this is a great opportunity to come together virtually, no travel required, and get a little bit of extra support in recovery and have some great workshops from hopefully some providers that you remember from your time at residential. Additionally, for our residential alumni, we have two upcoming residential alumni support groups. The next one we're hosting is on Tuesday, May 20th from 4 until 5, and then again on Tuesday, June 17th. So this monthly support group is open to residential alumni and is a great chance to come together and discuss just the challenges as you transition back into life or have been transitioned back into life and just want a little bit more support from people who have been in the same place you have been. And then we also have two more webinars coming up in our spring series. So in May, just in a couple of days, on Wednesday, May 21st, I will be presenting on standing up and speaking out, ways to become your own advocate. And then on Wednesday, June 11th, Dr. Sam DeCaro will be presenting Rising Under Pressure, Navigating Recovery in the Era of Ozempic. So both of these webinars are great opportunities, kind of middle of the week, middle of the day, to get a little extra support on some more specific topics. And we hope you all will join us during those. So now I would like to turn it over to our alumni panelists. So I'm joined by three alumni tonight. So Eve, Maria, and Susie, thank you all for joining me. And for those who haven't been a part of our panel discussions before, I'll give you a little breakdown of our format. Each of our panelists will be sharing a little bit about their recovery story and their recovery journey, their experiences, kind of maintaining recovery year round, and what recovery has looked like for them throughout their journey. And then we'll be doing a Q&A section where you are welcome to post any questions to the chat. It should be open for all people. I will double check. Yes, that you can chat with any of the hosts and panelists. So if you just send your questions through the chat to hosts and panelists, we'll get to those after everyone has gone through and told their story. So I will turn it over now to Eve, who will share their story a little bit. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you so much, Erin. Hi, my name is Eve Merritt. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And I'm really grateful to be here tonight, to be with you all and to celebrate recovery and to share my story. I'll begin with the first experience where I remember feeling body conscious. I was 10 years old, and for some reason, I remember this quite vividly. And I was at the movie theater with my mom and my brother. And I remember thinking, ooh, I would really like some junior mints. That sounds good right now. And then there was another voice in my head which said, ooh, but what if those make you fat? And it was at that moment where something shifted within me, and I started to notice more and more that that voice was becoming part of my experience, my day to day experience. And I grew up with parents who were quite self critical. And my dad also had an eating disorder. So restricting was certainly modeled to me in an indirect way. It's not something that he ever got treated for. And so I was very much the personality at home, the girl who just wanted to be the good girl, the one who was perfect, who was high achieving, who could make her parents proud. And I also grew up in a very religious environment. I felt that there was no room for me to really make mistakes. And so I was very hard on myself from an early age. I set the standard very high. I did not have a healthy relationship with myself from that experience that I had just shared for a long time. And on top of that, I felt very much like an outsider at school. I had a hard time making friends. I didn't understand why it was different. However, in retrospect, hindsight is 2020. But oh, someone says hard to hear on my end. Can everybody else hear me okay? I'll just keep talking and someone chime in.
Yeah, I can. You're goody.
Okay, perfect. So in hindsight, I felt so different because, well, I'm neurodivergent and queer. And growing up in the suburbs of St. Louis and not having had that figured out at that point, um, I beat myself up for not being able to be normal, whatever normal is. And I went to high school, and it was a very competitive school, and it just fueled my unhealthy eating habits, and my um, relationship with myself also became quite unhealthy. And it was at that point that I went for a visit to my doctor for a physical, and there was a questionnaire that was a mental health questionnaire. And I was very closed off in so many ways, but for whatever reason, I felt inspired to be honest in the questionnaire. And afterwards, my doctor recommended to me and my mom that I see a nutritionist. And so I did. And it was when I was 15 when I was diagnosed with anorexia. I started to meet with a therapist and a nutritionist regularly. However, I was really just doing it because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And I personally didn't see that I had a problem. I didn't want to believe that I had a problem. At the time, it felt like restricting was the way for me to cope with situations that felt outside of my control. There was quite a lot of turmoil at home. My parents were splitting up. My dad was having physical and mental health issues. And I found that, and this is still true for me, a lot of my emotions, a lot of my intuition, I feel it in my stomach. And so to cope with um, some uncomfortable feelings at that time, restricting sort of numbed out what felt uncomfortable, what felt like I wasn't capable of handling at the time. And so I went through high school and, continued to see my therapist and nutritionist and really do the bare minimum, if that. And I went against recommendations, and I moved to Nashville for school, even though I didn't get the approval of my support team at the time. And I thought that moving away would be a great opportunity for me to forget that I had any issues whatsoever, to create a new identity for myself. And I have to say that things just got worse. At first, I thought that I was truly free, and I led myself to believe, oh, I have no problems. However, it was even more isolating than I expected it to be. And I, during my first semester of college, started self harming. I felt very detached from my emotions. And for me, it was a way to see my pain made visible in a sense. And things kind of hit a climax when around Thanksgiving, I had been self harming so much that I told my RA and was rushed to the ER. And then I was on a medical leave of absence. I had to go to treatment in St. Louis, which once again, I was not invested in by any means. I actually ended up leaving before I was supposed to, because I, I didn't want to be there, plain and simple. And I was tired of people worrying about me, quite frankly. And I sort of continued to coast and try to cope and to fool people into thinking that I had everything together for the years that followed, even though I was still engaging in behaviors and exercising compulsively. However, in 2016, when my dad passed away, that's when things really changed for me. It was very unexpected. And it was at that time that I started binge eating. And it really was a way for me to feel comforted. Um, and and at that point, I was sort of cycling through restricting and then binging and compulsively exercising to the point where I really didn't feel like myself anymore. And I came to really feel that these behaviors, which for a time maybe I thought had helped, they were no longer helping me anymore. And so my therapist in St. Louis recommended that I reach out to Renfrew here in Nashville, and I am so glad that I did. I was fully committed to the idea of being in treatment, and I was in IOP because I was in my last semester of college. They wanted me to do PHP, but with my schedule, IOP was all that I could manage. But I am so grateful that I dedicated myself to myself during that time. It was really challenging with grief and schoolwork and just reforming a relationship with myself and my emotions, allowing myself to feel my emotions and to be in a space where that was safe, that was okay. And I'm so grateful for that safety net. Going through treatment has allowed me to pursue what really matters to me, which is music and my creative expression. And so, my recovery process has been non-linear, and not every day is perfect. Is any day perfect? I'm not sure about that. And fortunately, however, I can say that eating has become a lot more intuitive for me. Exercising has become a lot more intuitive for me over the years with support. And I'm so grateful for all the people who have reminded me who I am along the way and reminded me that I matter. And so now I can be here and share my story with you all. So thanks for listening. And I will pass it along to Maria.
Thanks so much, Eve. I also just want to say how thankful I am to be in this setting. I don't know why I'm like all of a sudden get emotional, but in 2005 is when my story kind of started. I was in senior in high school and I was just, your normal senior girl, athletic, always in lots of sports, never thought about my body in any way. Then it was strong and it just, got me some basketball state champs. And, I had a great 3-point shot. And the start of my senior year, my doctors thought it was a good idea to take my wisdom teeth and my tonsils out at the same time, which was completely debilitating to my body. And as you can imagine, I lost all my muscle and some weight because of just the inability to eat, with so much trauma to my mouth and my throat. And it was the first time that I experienced feeling insecure about my body. People that I know, and I, kind of got back because I was out of school for a whole month. I was like getting homeschooled. And so when I returned to school, everyone was kind of looking at me concerned, saying like, "Oh my gosh, you're so thin." But all I could hear was, "Oh, you must have been so awful before." Like nobody, like, well, how did you not know this? How did you not recognize this in yourself? And so it totally shifted everything for me. And it just brought on this time where I lost trust with myself. I lost connection with myself. And I just began to spiral because I was, it was my senior year. I was trying to get back to, my basketball body and my conditioning, and I wasn't nourishing myself because I was like, obviously I need to maintain this, appropriate figure because people are, commenting on, how good I look, but it wasn't how good I looked. It was, they were scared for me. And that's when it all started. And I, coincidentally enough, went to culinary school after I graduated from high school. And slowly I started to remove things from my diet. So I became a vegetarian, and then I became like only eating like raw food. And so at culinary school, it was obviously a challenge. I would, I always felt a need to be like perfect and entertaining and happy and, jovial and helpful. But I would isolate, and I would, go to these dark places that only I would know about. My parents didn't know, my friends didn't know, nobody in my life knew. And it wasn't until 2016. So I was, married for 6 years, and like all these years later, after I finally was able to seek treatment, because over the years, like after I graduated from culinary school, and then I met my, husband in 2007, and also at culinary school, and he's the reason I'm alive. He's the reason I'm here today, because of him and my family and my faith. And but it was hard to navigate. I just was always looking for like what's going to help me see myself as I want to be seen, as like, this perfect person. And I became a yoga instructor, and that didn't work. And I, it just went on and on for so long until, and when I started to engage in more behaviors where, I was not eating, and only if it was like appropriate and good and clean, and, you know, and then I would feel so bad, and then I would make myself throw up. And after this cycle for months and months, and I start, blood start coming up, and I knew I needed to seek help because I was on opposite schedules as my husband, and he would not get home until late. And so like every day I would go home at 5 o'clock to an abuser who was me. I was the abuser. And finally something clicked, and I knew, yeah, I had to share what was going on. I shared with him and my family, and my uncle had recommended that I go to Renfrew. And so I went to the one in New York City, and I was there from August until November. And I would take the train every morning at 6 o'clock and get in. And I was angry because I was like, they're gonna change me. They're gonna take away all of this that I've been working towards. And I was resistant at first, but then I realized weeks in that, okay, I'm able to express emotions, feel emotions. Just engaging with all the other incredible humans that were there sitting beside me, across from me. I heard myself in them. I saw myself in them. Even though we were from totally different places and different upbringings and different backgrounds and different ages, and I saw myself in each one of them. And it was such a beautiful transformation in my life, in my, it's still ongoing, but it it changed everything for me, and it allowed me to want to live again, to want to live, to want to beat this. My husband calls my eating disorder Edna, and he often kicks her out of the house when she shows her face. But it allowed me to find a path forward, and just be able to live and do things that I never thought I could. I didn't get my driver's license until I was 26, and I me and my husband recently, well, 3 years ago, but it still feels recent, moved across the country. So I was in New York, and now we live in Oregon. And I, because of the eating disorder, I never felt good enough or worthy, or out of all of our family, like, we don't have any children, and there's just certain things that we just kind of are this like unicorn couple that do things off brand, if you will. And so I always felt like I had to overcompensate, which led me into debt. And so 3 years ago, when I moved out here to Oregon, I was almost $30,000 in debt. I am proud to say today that I have no debt. And but that's because I was able to learn how to love myself again, learn how to understand that I have strength and power that I never knew. And I feel like oftentimes we dismiss how far we've come. And when you take a minute to look and say, okay, what have I accomplished in this last week? What have I accomplished in the month, years? I mean, it's incredible, the resiliency we have, the perseverance. It's amazing. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of, the Renfrew alumni group. And I was fortunate to be able to write an article for the Connections magazine last year. And I think that was the first time that when I read my own words, I like felt inspired, and I was like, wow, like, she sounds pretty great. Like, you need to listen to her more. And, I always want to take care of everyone else, and I don't take care of myself enough. And I'm learning how to be better to myself, and to, treat myself with that love and care and attention that I want to give everybody else all the time. And yeah, it's just a great thing to be part of. And, I hope that what I share helps somebody in a small way or big way. And because I know I've received so much from all of you. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. I'm proud to be here. I'm glad you're here. And I look forward to hearing what Susie has to say. So I'll pass it over to you, Susie. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. My name is Susie Denby. I use she, her pronouns. I always love these events because I think no matter like where we came from or like what walks of life we're in, I always hear echoes of my own story and everyone else's. So thank you, Maria and Eve, for sharing. For me, food has always been something I struggled against from a very, very young age. I um, was really consistently, even throughout childhood, told to lose weight, put on diets, just really felt like I was always compensating for my body and trying to change it. Um, and I think my eating disorder really started when I was 19. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome, and I saw an endocrinologist for that diagnosis, and she put me on an incredibly restrictive diet. Um, like gave me a one-page paper with some foods on it and was like, don't eat anything else besides this. Gave me a very limited number of calories to intake per day. And at the time, I was pretty excited about it because I thought this was going to be like the answer to the problems that I've always had with weight. I would just follow this really restrictive diet and everything would be fine and I would be thin. And what actually happened was this kind of set me on a very long cycle of restricting and binging. And So my whole first year of college, I basically would eat very little during the week, and then I would go home on the weekends and binge. And um, that really, it was kind of back and forth, but it really escalated after I graduated from college and was in my first job as a teacher. Um, and the same year that I graduated from college, I lost someone very close to me to cancer pretty unexpectedly. And that grief was really, um, it was really hard to process. And I think for me, food had always been something that felt comforting. And so the binging escalated at that point. And being a teacher was a really good excuse also to restrict all day long. There's always more to do, you're always busy. So I would go the full day without eating anything, and then I would binge on my way home in the car. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I got to a point where I would binge so much that I was physically like needed to purge. And that, after this long history of this restriction and binging, that is finally what kind of set off alarm bells in my head of like, hey, this is probably not normal. So since I was a teacher, I was fortunate that I had summers off, and so I just like Googled what do I do for this and found Renfrew, had an assessment and spent the summer of 2018 in PHP. Um, I found it very interesting that two other women I was in group with were also teachers. Could be the time of year, but also just says a lot about that job, I think, and how stressful it is and how we all find coping mechanisms. But I did PHP through the summer. I did IOP after that. And then I went back to work in the fall thinking this was gonna like really change everything. It was gonna be great. And before treatment, I was like really excelling as a teacher. After treatment, when I started setting boundaries, I wasn't so much um, excelling. I was really struggling with being able to maintain recovery and be a teacher. Um, and then at the end of 2019, I had another major loss in my family. And that really set me back a lot in my recovery. What I've learned in therapy is that grief for me feels a lot like emptiness, and emptiness feels a lot like hunger, and hunger feels like it can be filled with binging. So that's kind of where I was at. And so I went back to IOP in early 2020. Uh, Graduated from IOP on March 12th, 2020, which I vividly remember because the 13th was my last day of school um, before we shut down for the COVID pandemic. And so I came out of treatment and completely lost all semblance of structure that I had at all. And so thankfully, I was able to stay connected with Renfrew through the virtual outpatient group. And that was really, really helpful. And I'm so grateful that they had that virtual programming because I think that is really what kept me grounded and in recovery through that time. But so I would say like from 2020 is when I really started maintaining recovery and adjusting to not using those coping behaviors that I had been using for so long. Um, and yeah, so now I just love events like these to stay connected to Renfrew and recovery. And I am really super grateful to be here sharing with all of you. And I look forward to your questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Eve, and thank you, Maria, for sharing. I it's always so great to get to hear everyone's stories because everyone has such a different experience, and yet also, Susie, like you said, those lines, those themes that kind of tie everything together. And I think that's what recovery is really about. It's about finding that community. It's about finding that connection through like authentically being ourselves and sharing our stories. Um, So Eve, Marie, I want to invite you guys to come back on camera, and we will get started with our Q&A section portion. If as you guys have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will get to them as we can. I guess to start, you all kind of talked about some very big and like difficult experiences you've had both pre-treatment and post-treatment. And I'm wondering how you find the strength to continue tolerating those uncomfortable emotions when they come up. Because that's one of the things we know, they're never going to not come up. Like we're all going to have those uncomfortable emotions. And how do you all find that strength to continue tolerating them and not going back to those coping skills we used to use?
I could go. Oop.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
I think at Renfrew, the biggest takeaway for me was brutal honesty. Just like being so like uncomfortably so. And that is just since Renfrew, that's the way I've lived my life. And I, find myself like even like looking at myself in the mirror and being like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? Like, why haven't you taken lunch the past 3 days? Like, get your shit together, Maria. And just like feeling the emotions, feel like just talking to myself, like I would talk to my best friend, like I would talk to my husband, like I would talk to my 13-year-old niece, like, and I think that is just the biggest thing. Like every day, like Eve said, every day is not perfect, but that's the core values that we learned are in me. They're never going to leave me. And even though like I might have a bad week or a bad month or a bad day, I keep coming back to what I know works. If I have to write down my exchanges for a couple of weeks to get back on track, I do it. If I, those things, meal planning and making lists, and if the list isn't perfect, it's okay. And, like it's just that kind of stuff. But the brutal honesty for me was a game changer.
Definitely relate to that. And I'm trying every day to become more and more brutally honest. And I was also thinking that for me, I'm so grateful that I have music to be like a container for my emotions, for when I'm going through something that feels, particularly difficult or overwhelming. Like I know that I can just come to my studio and turn my microphone on and scream or, sing a sad song and just like allow for that to come out of me so that I'm not ruminating or just kind of stewing on it. It also has been so helpful to, I stay connected with some of the women that I went through treatment with. So I know that they're always available and happy to offer support, as well as my boyfriend. And yeah, since I learned how to relate to my emotions through being at Renfrew, I came to learn through experience, like little by little through practice, that if I'm not using an unhealthy behavior to resist an emotion, if I just allow it, then it will pass. It will pass a lot faster than if I try to reject it or, circumvent it. And so, as uncomfortable as it can be at times, and as intense as I can feel emotionally, I always remind myself that if I'm willing to have a little bit of compassion for whatever is coming up and say, okay, all right, that's fine, Eve, you're angry, or okay, you're really anxious. That's all right. That's all right. Just be with it, pass, allow it to pass and do the next right thing.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that as well. And I think for me, it's just recognizing that it's all temporary, right? And remembering that. I think pre-treatment, that was something that I really struggled with. I think when I was feeling a strong emotion, I like couldn't remember a time when I wasn't feeling a strong emotion. And so you get kind of bogged down in like, is this gonna be forever? But it never is, of course. And so just remembering that those things are temporary, for me is really helpful.
Anything that helps you guys with that, like reminder that it's temporary, that like it will pass. Cause I think that is such the hard part. Cause like you're saying, Susie, like it's like when you're in it, you're like, no, this is how it feels. This is how it's always gonna feel.
Mhm.
I don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, um, a lot of times, and this is, I'm like now jogging my own memory of primary and secondary emotion, right? But for me, it's like primary and secondary thought pattern as well. Of like, sometimes that primary thought pattern is how I've been conditioned, like what I've been conditioned to believe, and then the secondary thought comes in and is like, wait a second, like, is that really true? And so that like, just reframing of that is really helpful. Um, and giving myself time to work through that too, of like, sometimes I am in it, like this is never gonna change. And then I'm like, it takes me a little bit to get to the second part where I'm like, okay, but like it does though. Like it's just hearing both thoughts and holding them both at the same time. And that's taken a lot of practice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I feel like another skill that I learned at Renfrew, I remember in particular one very powerful group where I don't know what the technical term for this exercise is, but we had to stand in front of a mirror and objectively describe what we were seeing. And that wrecked me. I mean, that was a huge moment for me. And that skill of, when you're faced with intense emotions, um, being able to just kind of like witness what you see and what you experience objectively, um, to kind of like get outside of, for me, I have a very active mind. And so to kind of just regulate myself by saying, okay, look at that. The trees are looking beautiful outside. And I can count how many leaves on that one branch. And so, mindfulness, I would say, and being in nature are also quite helpful for me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
same
that
for, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it is a mindfulness skill, Eve. So yes.
That for me, like I often, if I feel like that fog of, something bad setting in and I need to like make a change, like I'll step outside, I'll just get out of wherever I am, like change my scenery. But also for me, I have this like new little ritual where like I light a candle and I like kind of take it with me. So it's kind of like my light. Like if I feel like the darkness is encroaching, like I'm like, okay, like you need to do something. You need, like, if I'm feeling vulnerable. And so I have done this little, like, it's kind of a new thing for me. And it works because it's like the reminder when you can't remind yourself when you're deep in the fog and you're like, it's just like, I love like the light and the dark of all of it. And I always want to like find my way to the light. And so that's been like a little helpful tool for me.
Great. Well, and I love this idea that you guys are also highlighting the fact that it develops and it changes and it grows over time. Like the things that we were using right out of treatment are not the things that we're still going to be necessarily using 5, 10, 15 years on. Some of them will be and they'll still like come around, and some of them it's like it's going to change, it's going to develop as time goes on.
Mhm.
What do you all feel like are some of the experiences you've had kind of in recovery that have helped kind of reinforce like this knowing the strength that you have?
I think for me, it's like this type of experience that we're having right now, like connecting with other people in recovery and feeling like we can learn something from each other. I think that there's just such power in that. And I think it's these kinds of spaces that do remind me of my own strength to say, and I think I really also self-identify as like I'm an atypical person in recovery. Like my body does not look like a typical person recovering from an eating disorder. And then I remind myself how important it is for those types of stories to be represented. Um, so I think like that has been helpful as well.
I would agree. I would say having the honor to do things like this, to connect with you all. And I don't really take enough time to see how far I've come. I'm very like future focused, I would say, and because I like to achieve things, sometimes I take what I've gone through for granted. And so I'm grateful for opportunities like these, to like even just hearing myself speak. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you did a hard thing. That's cool. And having the blessing of being able to hear from you, Maria and Susie, and to connect with you all here listening. It definitely is a great reminder of how strong we all are.
Sounds like
Yeah, and I
similar to
think,
Maria reading her Voice of Recovery and Connections and being like,
yeah, no, it's like, yeah, it's incredible. And I shared it with so many people in my life, from, when I was a little girl to like my brother-in-law, this big macho, like, tough and rough guy, New York electrician. And like it brought him to tears. And it like it impacted me like I can't even explain. And that's what I think the most important thing is, like sharing our stories, not with just each other, but with the people in our lives, like people that maybe don't get it. But like now he has two girls that are 16 and 13, and he's going through it, those teenage years. And he wants to make sure they know their self-worth, and he can help them if they have any issues or they have any concerns, or they, and like that just is beautiful. And so yeah, that's what it's about for me, is just like the communication, like brutal honesty, and like overly communicating with people about, how we need to treat each other, how we need to see each other, and hopefully we can reflect that on ourselves of how we continue to treat ourselves.
thinking of that idea of like sharing the brutal honesty, the authenticity, the connection you guys found, like just meeting each other last week and then doing this panel this week. Like, how has it been for you all to find community and like re-engage in the relationships you have in life post kind of treatment and in recovery? Because I always talk, especially with families, I'm like, you got to understand, like, this person in treatments, they're learning a new language. They're learning a new way to function, a new way to be. And like, if the family's not on board, it's going to feel like they're speaking German to you. And you're like, you just sound like you're yelling a lot of consonants at me. I'm not sure what's happening. Um, so how has it been for you all to kind of have that new sense of connection, those relationships, kind of with that maybe different viewpoint than what we had before?
I'll go ahead and share a little bit. I had a very difficult time during treatment in that I did not really have any support from my family. And so that was something that I really was committed to figuring out. And through the process of recovery, I have come to realize that not all relationships are worth investing in, that I only want to be engaged in relationships where I am seen, I am respected, that the other person inspires me to love myself and to be a better person. And, this is an ongoing process. I can be kind of by default pretty naive. um, However, it really felt like going through treatment. I mean, I was back at square one in every single way. And, forming friendships with the women who I went through treatment with, that was like, they were my rock for a long time. And I really was committed to going to therapy and my nutritionist. And for a few years afterwards, I had to be like, okay, I can scale it back a little bit. And also simultaneously, engaging in the music scene here in Nashville and forming new friendships that were centered around creative expression and making a whole like host of friends in that sort of regard. And so, yeah, I would say I kind of went from zero to wherever I am now. I don't know how to quantify it, but yeah, I have given myself permission to, I mean, maybe it sounds a little ironic, but to be a little bit picky when it comes to the relationships that I allow in. And, you know, in some cases, like with family, it can be hard because I want to maintain some sort of relationship with them. And so it just takes having better boundaries for me and sticking with those boundaries, not being afraid to reinforce them if needed, because that's something that I've learned through recovery too, is it's one thing to express a boundary, but chances are you're going to have to reinforce it, especially if people are not used to you having boundaries. So
Yeah, I love that, Eve. I think that's something that I still am practicing a lot. I think for me also, I had a therapist tell me, uh, I was like talking about all these friendships, and I tend to be like a really deep feeler. And one time a therapist was like, you don't actually have to have like a deep soul connection with every person in your life. Like you can have friends that are just like fun to get coffee with. And I think like that thought had never occurred to me before. And so I think it is kind of trial and error of figuring out who are your people, like who are the people who are going to understand you and lift you up versus like who are the people in your life that you kind of do keep more at an arm's length. And I think both are healthy. Um, but I do think that like post recovery, there's a lot more authenticity in all of my relationships. And I also do definitely credit Renfrew for my marriage. Not that I like met my husband at Renfrew, but I did meet him while I was in PHP. And I really don't think that our relationship would have gotten to the level of intimacy to like get to a marriage if I had met him prior to being in treatment because um, treatment really gave me the courage and the strength to like be fully authentically myself. Whereas before meeting new people, I would kind of like keep everyone at a distance. And if it got too real, I would just like bail. So, um, I think being more in touch with my own feelings and then also being more comfortable with myself really gave me um, the means to like have more authentic relationships.
For me, it's like a combination of what you both said. So for me, in my family, I was always like the kind of the glue that was like making sure everybody was seeing each other and doing everything. And now I'm on the other side of the country from all of my family because when we moved to Oregon, the only people we knew were each other, me and my husband. But like having those boundaries, like time is precious and life is precious. And why do you want to sit in a room with somebody like just because you're related to them, but they make you feel like awful? Like I don't do that anymore. Like I'm like when I go home, like I'm gonna be home in a month, and I'm like I'm gonna see people that nourish and care and love, and like I'm gonna be Maria. I'm not gonna be fake Maria and just like conform because they're being awful and I have to deal with it because they're my cousin. No, I'm gonna go and see people that I actually love and care about. I mean, not that I don't love those other people, I do, but it's just like they're not worth my time anymore, and that's okay to say. And that's what I've learned too. It's again that honesty. It's you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest in your relationships. And like me and my husband met at culinary school 18 years ago, and he was like, "What's gonna happen like with us?" When I was going through Renfrew, he's like, "We cook. Like this is our life. We go these like meals and this and we found a balance. We found a way to survive. And he knows me better than I know myself. Like he's like my Renfrew language guru. He like when we're in a situation, he's looking at me like she just said that. Is that okay? Are you gonna freak out? Like what's gonna happen? Do we need to just run out the front door? Like because you can't protect yourself from everything. I mean, the TV, the phones, everything. We're inundated with all the nonsense, and just surrounding yourself with people who get it, who get your core, who get where you're going, what you want to be, what you want to do, how you want to live. I mean, that's just, and you don't have to have 50 of those people, even if you just have one or two, like that's enough.
You guys kind of touched on this, but how has treatment impacted the other areas of your life? Like outside of, we always talk about the eating disorder is just one aspect of life. And the goal really of recovery is that we can pay attention to all those other aspects of life so much more. How have you all noticed it kind of impacting those areas that maybe before we were like, oh, that's not super related to my eating disorder, or like, oh, that's not a thing that's going to be impacted, or whatever it might be?
I'm having so many ideas come to mind. So, one is after I went through treatment, I realized that I was severely codependent.
Mhm.
And after peeling back the layers of the eating disorder and those behaviors, it became very apparent that I got all of my self esteem through how other people perceived me and if I was doing a good job at being who they wanted me to be. And so I started to really investigate how can I give myself confidence from within myself. And for me, that's music. And I will say, like, being in the music industry, whew, there's a lot going on there, being in the public eye, like seeing videos of myself, seeing pictures of myself, being highly visible, like using my voice. It is all great practice for me to love myself in whatever way that I show up, and I feel really grateful that I can be in this position to allow other people to see that it's okay. We can show up as we are. We don't have to be 100% polished, like. And so I'm really grateful for the Codependence Anonymous group that I continue to go to, because that is ongoing work for me, and for my creative practices to continue to challenge me with this idea of it's okay for me to be seen. I love myself, and I enjoy performing and sharing my music with people. And it is um, just exactly what I need for that growth and to continue to build confidence from within myself.
I love that, Eve. I think I also am fully recovering from codependency as well. And I think I like left a whole career after being in treatment. Like I started over completely in my career. I realized that I also was getting a lot of my self-esteem from what I could do for others and from people seeing what I could do for others. And that is something that in education gets taken advantage of. And I had to leave. I had to leave for my recovery, for my own mental health. And now I do, and I actually will like text my best friend sometimes at work and be like, guess what just happened? Someone asked me, like, hey, do you have capacity to do this thing? And I said, actually, I don't. I don't. And like that's something that pre-recovery I never would have been able to do. So yeah, I think I fully agree. I think I am definitely a lot better at finding internal intrinsic self-esteem.
For me, I applaud that, Susie, because it's like something that I'm dealing with every day too, to like learn how to say no. But like we moved out here 3 years ago to work in the wine industry, and you know, we both got these jobs, and I felt like I found this family. It was like this husband and wife own this winery out of here. Everyone that worked there worked for them for like 20 plus years. It was like a magical little land. And then last September, everything fell apart. Husband and wife getting divorced. He's having an affair with a woman that works with us. It was bananas. We were going through harvest. We're working 60 days in a row. And I was like heartbroken. And I was like, I can't survive, or I'm going to go, old behaviors are coming back. I can't control the situation. I'm just grasping for anything. And so, and again, the brutal honesty, like I was honest with him. Like I was like, this is not good. Like, what is going to happen? And he gave me a $10,000 raise, like all this ridiculousness. And I said, you know what? I got to go. I gave 7 weeks notice. I trained the person that they hired to replace me. And at the end of the year, I left. And I still, and it breaks my heart. Because it was the hardest professional decision I ever had to make, but I had to do it for me. And it's like, I felt it in my gut. It was like, there was a day where there was a fork in the road and it's like, okay, you're going to drown, or, you have to. And like, people were like, but you moved out there to work in the wine. And I was like, they're like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I definitely don't want to work in the wine industry anymore. And because of my strong faith, I just trusted that something was going to present itself. And ironically, I now work at a seminary helping form men for the priesthood. So it's a totally different shift. I always say I'm like a gypsy in my life, but because I was a chocolatier and a private chef and all the different things I've done in my life, but I've never had more peace and purpose and being able to support these men in this mission that they're on. And I don't know, it's taken my life in a turn that I've never expected, but because I'm able to trust myself when I know I need, here I am. And it's okay. Like, it doesn't, and that's, I think the other thing is, like, you don't have to just deal with it. Like, I could have stayed. I mean, who says no thank you for this increase in salary? Like, no, it's like, I'm more important than you trying to buy me. And it's just, yeah, but having that trust in yourself that you're worth it. You're worth more than anything anybody could ever do to try and silence you, basically, is what he was going to do.
It's amazing though to think about like how before it's like all of that trust was kind of like in the eating disorder. Like that was the thing that was going to help us get through. Like, this is what's going to help me get through. This is what's going to help me do this. And now to like have that shift to, no, I trust myself. Like, I trust myself to have these uncomfortable emotions. I trust myself to be able to like do this next step. What do you think it was that helped you guys or had that moment of realizing like, okay, I can trust myself again. I don't need to rely on something else or someone else to get me through difficult things? What do you think helped you recognize that trust in yourself? Or that you could trust yourself?
Something in me just like clicked, like with this past experience I had. Like, I came home and I told my husband what I was going to do, and he's like, but you don't have a job. And, and I was like, I know, but I'll find it. Like, it will happen. And he, coincidentally enough, found this position I am. In January, he was like, oh, I think you should apply to this. And I was like, okay. And then, it all happened. But yeah, it was just like, I knew, I felt it. And, it's like that voice in your head that you've kind of been silencing for so long has finally, like, hello, remember me? Like, I'm really important. You should listen to me. Like, we're besties. And like, when you do, magic happens. It's like, you have to trust, because you feel it, when you silence it, and then you go to the other way, and then you feel real bad, and you're like, if you only would have just listened to what I was trying to say. And sometimes you feel like you're a crazy person because you're having multiple conversations, and you're like, it's okay. This is normal. This is what normal is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was what it was for me.
I can so relate to that, Maria. I feel like for me, trust is something that I've had to build over time. And I'm learning like every day is an opportunity for me to tune into that subtle guidance within. And one example that I can share about a time when I had like an intuitive feeling that I just sort of set aside was it was actually in February 2020. I got into a relationship with someone, and it was a very unhealthy relationship. And he convinced me to stop seeing my therapist. Like, he was wanting to control what I wore. He was very critical of my body. It was a very emotionally abusive situation. We would get into arguments, and I would go all day without eating. And I had such inner turmoil because there was an intuitive part of me which was screaming at me to do something, to leave. And then there was a big part of me that's like, oh, well, you've already invested so much in this relationship, and just he'll change, it'll be fine. And it really just took, like Maria said, you just have to take a leap of faith. Like, it got to a point where it became parent, I mean, I went on tour and I had some mental and physical distance to realize, like, oh my God, he's been making me keep what happens in this relationship a secret. And well, that's not okay. And now I'm really realizing how much better I feel when I'm not with him, which is evidence in and of itself. And so I went from being in one of the most difficult situations of my life to like getting my own apartment, having my own place, like going on a tour of the United Kingdom, like literally like night and day. And it was all because I had the courage in one moment to stand up for myself and to express the intuitive feeling that I had suppressed for 4 years. And there are times when I feel like shame and regret for all the instances. Like, that's not the only instance where I've ignored myself. Okay. And I'm still learning every day, but it's okay. It's okay. I am so grateful to be where I am now and to witness that the more that I pay attention to those like subtle internal cues and I go with them, like the stronger that relationship becomes.
Yeah, I think you both nailed it. It's a lot of trial and error for sure. And I think something that resonated with me that I saw like in a video some time ago is anxiety comes from two places. One, the first place is not knowing what's going to happen, and the second place is not trusting yourself to handle it when it does. And that is something I always remember is like, look at every single thing I've handled up till this point. Like, I can do it, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but I can do it. And I've done it thus far. So I think sometimes just reminding yourself that like it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have bad days, you're going to mess it up, but when you do, you can handle it.
Mhm. I love that idea, Susie, because it is like it's about our ability to handle it. And even Maria, you guys both talked about like that intuitive sense. And I think so often we're like, well, but can I trust that? Is that really true? And what if I trust it and then it doesn't work out? And it's like, okay, and that we handle it. Like we've gone through so much, especially once somebody's gone through treatment, like treatment's not easy. Like it's really, really hard work. Like it's not fun. Um, and it's like, okay, I got through that and I was able to handle that and talk about uncomfortable emotions. Like I was like 3 hours of therapy a day minimum. Like that's a lot. Um, so it is really hard. I wonder with like thinking about things that we still have to handle, and y'all touched on this before with like, we're still living in a society that supports diet culture, and with the recent increase in weight loss medication discussions, like how you all are kind of handling when those discussions come up, when those topics come up, when you see things around that, while also holding on to, those recovery beliefs of like all bodies are good bodies, all foods fit, like how to kind of balance those two and maintain that mindset when you've got all this other noise coming from marketing companies, basically. Um, Around weight loss and the thin ideal and diet culture beliefs.
Yeah, I'm going to be like really real. Like I fully asked my doctor like, "Do you think I should be on a GLP-1?" Um and then I was like, "Why am I doing that?" Like what is their purpose? Um and I'm really lucky that my doctor is um really not like weight focused and more overall health focused. And so, her answer was like I kind of was like, my fear is that like I'll go on it and then I'll have to be on it for the rest of my life to like maintain. And she's like, yeah, we really don't know. There's really no research. And I was like, well, I guess that's my answer. Um, but I think for me, it's the difficulty comes in wanting my body to be more functional in the world that we live in. I can in recovery fully recognize that this is not a me problem, but there is still a lot of things that I am excluded from because of the size and shape of my body. And so functionally, it would make my life a lot easier if I were smaller. And that's just like fact. one of my favorite quotes is Aubrey Gordon, who has done a lot of work like in this diet culture space. Um, she's like, yeah, like body positivity is great, but I can't love myself out of an oppressive system. So
Mhm.
like there's still discrimination.
Mhm.
There's still spaces that I can't go in. There's still a lot that I have to think about that a thinner person doesn't have to think about. And so like I'm gonna be real, GLP-1s were really tempting. Like it was like, is this a miracle cure? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before with like first voice, second voice, where first voice is like how I've been conditioned, second voice is um really my actual thought, and just letting it catch up to myself, like letting all of that treatment catch up to where I am now.
Mhm.
And so now I'm at a point in recovery where I have been talking about like with my therapist, like, is it okay for me to pursue weight loss for function and no other reason? And then I kind of got to a realization where I was like, why is that the measure? Like, why is that the measure of what I want to do? You know, I want to increase movement. I want to increase veggies. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And so, um, I'm really lucky that I'm able to like maintain therapy and have access to that, because my therapist, when I was telling her, you know, I just I want to start weighing myself again because I just want to see if the work I'm putting in is working. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like that's not really a metric that is necessary. And she said to me, exactly, like good catch. Um,
Mhm.
the number on the scale is literally just a measure of your body's relationship to gravity, and it doesn't mean anything else. And so that's kind of where I landed with it. Um, but it definitely brings up a lot of stuff. Um, and the other thing that I constantly remind myself is this is just another fad. Like, and
Mhm.
we'll get through it. Like the 90s had low fat, the 2000s had low carb. Like, it's just another thing that people think is like the cure, and it just never is because all bodies are different, and that's fine.
Mhm.
So yeah, sorry. I got excited about that question.
Oh, that was great. Amen to
Yeah.
all.
I was
Yeah,
like,
your
you don't,
honesty is
no
so
need to
refreshing.
apologize.
Yeah, because you're real and you're just, again, that brutal honesty. Like, and I love how like you're having the conversation with the doctor, but you're basically having a conversation with yourself because you're like asking the question and then you're answering the question because you know what the right answer is, but you're still going to ask it, which is
Yeah.
what we need to do to work through it because, the eating disorder brain is still very much powerful sometimes, but your recovery brain is also gaining traction. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that's, yeah, I just feel like it's hard to, live when you're just inundated all the time, but just having those reminders of like why I'm doing what I'm doing, like, you know, I was going to a dinner recently and I was like having lunch with like the same group of people I was going to go for this dinner. And they were like, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much food there tonight. Like we should just like not even have lunch. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have lunch because it's lunchtime and I need to have lunch. So I nourish my body so I can get to dinner because otherwise dinner's probably not going to be a super successful evening, and it's just like, I just want to be like, oh, but it's just like, and I don't need to scream and yell at them, but I will remind myself, like, you're having lunch because that is what you need at this time. And it doesn't matter if they just want to, like, have a glass of water, then that's for them to deal with. But, just remind yourselves, like, you do what you need for yourself and you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. You don't have to justify what you're doing. Sometimes I'll, let people have it with, like, what if they say something that makes me uncomfortable or makes it, if especially it's directed towards me, but and it's also nice just to educate people because so many people just have no idea. And but yeah, just the constant reminder of like why you're doing what you're doing, all the work you put in to get to this place, like you don't need to go back there because there's a trend happening.
Completely agreed. And I love what you said, Maria. It's like, do what works for you, Through the process of treatment and working with my nutritionist afterwards as well, I came to like really see how all of these false ideas that I had about diet and food were, I mean, they were false. They were so far from the truth. And not I mean, most people don't get to have the experience of working with a nutritionist to see what really works for them and what really is true for them. And there have been a few times when people have tried to preach to me about a certain diet or a certain whatever, and um, it touches a very emotional place within me because for so many years I was victim, to my own beliefs that eating had to look a certain way. And even still, this is, there will never not be a time when people don't want to talk about food or bodies, which I'm just like, wouldn't it be so nice if we lived in a world where we just would mind our own business?
So much more to talk about. So
Right?
much.
Like literally anything. The weather, come on. Like there's many topics. And, I will get triggered sometimes, like over Easter, I was with my aunt and we were eating and she's like, "Oh, wow, you're eating a lot." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hungry." Yep. Internally, I was like, okay, great." But it's like, you know what? That's her. That's not me. Like, here is the boundary. That's you. That's your belief. That's your projection or opinion. I'm doing great over here. So
Good for you.
thank you.
Yeah. I think about it, I'm like, I wonder sometimes if the experience of people who have been treatment providers and are in like the anti-diet culture haze like community, I was like, are we like the guys that worked on like Columbus's boat that like came back to Spain and were like, no, seriously, dude, we didn't fall off the edge of the earth. We went around it. Like, are we like the guy that they're like, yeah, okay, dude, good for you. Like, I was like, are we the people? Like, is that all of us that it's like, no, I swear we have this knowledge. We really know what we're talking about. And everyone else is like, yeah, but those guys over there said, and it's just with diet culture.
Yeah, so Erin, that just reminded me of something that like really helps me like stay in the anti-diet culture mindset is actually in the intuitive eating workbook. They talk about all of the research that shows that all of these problems, all these health problems that so many doctors attribute to being overweight are actually also caused by weight cycling.
Mhm.
And like, I challenge you to find a person in a larger body who has not weight cycled. Like,
Mhm.
it's just such a common experience. And so I'm like, maybe like this restrict binge cycle is actually more harmful than being overweight.
Mhm.
Overweight means at the time.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like sometimes I'm like, I just have to understand, like, we all have this knowledge that not everyone's going to believe just yet, but like, you're going to get there one day. There's going to be a time where people are like, can you believe people thought the earth was flat? Like, you guys have all talked about like, and we say this all the time, recovery is not linear. So, in your journeys of recovery, when there have been harder times, maybe you felt like it was like kind of a stable period in recovery, something kind of makes you weeble wobble a little bit. How do you deal with maybe not kind of getting back on track, not getting back to where you were as quickly as you hoped, or finding that it's a little bit harder to fight against those voices or ideas sometimes? How do you guys kind of handle situations like that?
I could share. Going back to like this whole situation I just went through with like leaving my job, and then it's like I go home for the holidays and then we come back and it's like, okay, I come back, I don't have a job, I'm not getting money. I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't even know what I'm going to do. And so like I did engage with, old behaviors, and I'm like, ugh, like how? Like I'm like 3 days into the new year and this is where I am. And but it's like like that fog lifts and the light flickers and I'm leaving the darkness, and I'm like, okay, like put on my Renfrew tube belt, and what do I need to do? And I'm sitting down, I'm writing down my meals, I'm journaling, I'm, crocheting, which I love to do. I'm like, I'm going for a walk in the morning, I'm going to a daily mass, like things that I know are going to help me to have a clear head, have a clear mind, think, and, you know, not that I disengage from people, but it's like, okay, like maybe I'm trying to connect with people too much. And I'm just getting like all this stuff, like gossip from this or that, a family situation happened. And it's like, maybe that's too much. Like put the TV off, like maybe listen to some music, but it's like get back to center and really invest in like, okay, what does Maria need? What does, what do I need to do? How am I going to have a successful breakfast, lunch, dinner? Like sit, prepare, put a candle on the table, put some flowers, like whatever you need to do to make it through the morning. And like just and I had the time because I didn't have a job. So like I was able, which is also really scary because like, okay, now I'm home by myself because my husband's going to work. So it's like, okay, can I trust that I'm gonna take care of myself in this space, which I used to not take care of myself when I was alone. And that's what it is. And it's just having that like that relationship with yourself, that just getting back to the basics. Like I feel like when I entered Renfrew, it was like I felt like I was a little kid again. It was like, sit here and eat your meal, and then if you eat your meal you're going to get some dessert. And I was like, I don't want it, but like, okay, that's okay too, but it's like, no, it's like you need, it's okay. It's not a scary thing, especially if you like that cookie, which it's good and it tastes, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just having those skills and going through that. Or like art. I loved the art class when I was at Renfrew. Like there's like pictures of art all over like loved ones' houses that I made at Renfrew. And to like going back to things that I don't do enough that I need to do. And I think that, and it might not just like one day, it might not fix everything. It might take a couple of weeks to get back on track. Um, and even like, then I started a new job right away. Like I was only off for a month. And then like, now I'm reestablishing my day to day with this new work schedule. And, how's this going to look? And people are inviting me for lunch and now you're meeting new people and well, they don't know about me and my eating disorder and like how, and it's like, well, I don't need to be Maria with the eating disorder. I just need to be Maria. And, and so yeah, like, and this is like all very, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm 8 years in my recovery and it still is changing and evolving, but I feel like I'm gaining more strength, and like the delay in the bounce back isn't as long as it might have been before.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think something that's been really helpful for me to remind myself is like once you learn that some of those behaviors work, you can't unlearn that. Like once you learn that, engaging in an eating disorder behavior helps with this emotion, helps you feel more comfortable dealing with an emotion, like that's not something you can ever just be like, oh, I forgot that worked. Like that's just it's just not gonna happen. And so sometimes you do find yourself going back to that, and that doesn't mean that you failed at recovery. It just means that something got too overwhelming. You went back to an old tool, and then you just recognize, like, oh, I'm actually like, I've built a lot of other ways to deal with this, so I'm gonna try that instead. But and just giving yourself the grace to know that like you're not a failure because you went back to those behaviors once or twice or however many times it took.
Yes, I agree. I think grace is a huge part of it because I feel like what fueled my eating disorder for so long was a lack of grace. And for every time I did something that I perceived as a mistake, I would double down on the behaviors that would hurt myself. It's like just this, I would make a mistake and then punish myself and then punish myself for punishing myself. And it was just like a spiral of shame. And through recovery and for, through the process of letting go of, that shame that I had held on to, it became easier and easier for me to just do the next right thing and to not like think like, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world because I've done this. It's like, okay, get over yourself. You're okay. You're like, it's okay. You did that. It didn't feel great. That's all right. We're just going to do like literally just what's the next thing that you could do that would help yourself right now. And I will say too that like as time has gone on, that anytime that I entertain like the thought of a behavior or if a behavior does come up, like it feels worse and worse. It's like it just like I'm like, okay, I'm different now. Like my brain is different, my body is different. Like these things just, they are not helpful in the way that I, felt before. And so yeah, I'm grateful for the growth that has happened over time. And sometimes, like, I don't know, maybe this is going to sound a bit weird, but having that experience of going back to behavior, sometimes that's the wake up call that's needed.
Mhm.
Sometimes it takes
Mhm.
hitting that rock bottom or going back to that thing to be like, oh, okay, like now I really know that I'm no longer going to romanticize that idea because, okay, look here, that didn't feel good.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. Yeah, it's not weird at all. I feel the exact same way.
Great.
Well, I always think of it as like, we all can think of those times where you're driving somewhere and all of a sudden you like start driving to like an old office or like I one time started driving to my hairdressers. I was like going to work and I just started driving to my hairdressers. They're not two very different ways on 695 if anyone's in the Baltimore area. Like, and I remember like when we do those things, none of us are like, well, I guess I'll just go to my hairdressers instead of work now, like, and just keep going. And like, I didn't just show up and be like, hey, I know I don't have an appointment and I don't know why I'm here, but here I am. Like, we don't have to keep going with it. That idea, Eve, of like, what's the next right thing I can do? Like, we say, like, oh, crap, like, well, this is going to add 5 minutes to my drive. This isn't what I wanted. And let me get off at the next exit and get back where I need to go and this and that. And we take that next step and being able to have that same kind of sense for ourselves when it's like, oh, I did that behavior. I didn't mean to do that. Like that, okay, that's going to add 5 minutes to my whatever, metaphorically speaking. And like, let me figure out what's the next exit I can get off on. Like, where can I do something different next time? And it's such an important piece. Yeah, I love that. What kind of thinking about those times when people do feel stuck or when they feel like I don't need support, no, nobody knows what I'm going through, nobody knows what I'm feeling. How would you guys try to connect with somebody who's maybe struggling but doesn't feel like they maybe need the support right now, or struggling but doesn't feel like people are going to understand them?
I use I statements a lot. I think when I see someone close to me struggling, it's never like, "Have you considered therapy?" It's like, "Oh, I went to my therapist last week and this is what we talked about and I feel so much better." Of just like trying to model the behavior that you would love to see from other people,
Yeah.
um, I think can be really helpful and to just normalize asking for help. Because I think that is the hardest thing, and especially if I mean, we've all touched on like the perfectionism and the black and white thinking that we experience in eating disorder, especially if you're like in that shame spiral, it can feel like a complete failure to ask for support. Um, and so yeah, I think just like speaking your own experience and your own truth and then kind of letting them know in subtle ways that you are a safe space for whenever they decide that they are ready to ask for support.
I love that. It's more of that like inviting Susie as opposed to like saying, like, you kind of open up the discussion. Oh, in therapy, I was talking about that, as opposed to like, have you thought about seeing a therapist? Sounds like you might need some help.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I approach it too, is like if I see the struggle and I see them, I might even ask them for help, in the way that I know they need it and see how they react to me. And then like try and have like an honest conversation, about like I'm struggling, like how do you deal with this, or how, and see how they respond, and just let them know like I see you and I'm on the same, like we're in the same lane, like, and like it's a safe space here.
Yes, most definitely. I think that um, there is a part of my maybe personality or conditioning where when I when I perceive that someone is suffering and I like see their potential, like there will be this inner frustration of like, oh, if they would just like do this thing, like they would feel so much better. And you know, as we all know, you can't control other people. And I think just allowing people a space to be heard so that they can hear themselves and come to their own realizations at their own timing, like that's the best thing that you can do for somebody. And you know, I'm a fan of Mel Robbins, and her let them theory is super helpful as well. So this is another instance where that is relevant.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got just 5 minutes left. So wrapping up with, you know, just super simple, very basic question that I'm sure like one word answers, we're going to be fine. How do you feel like you maintain recovery? Not at all so simple and basic. So take your time to think on that one. But what do you all like when you think about this idea? Because, you know, we talk about maintaining recovery, we talk about it being a journey. Anyone listening to the podcast, there's maintenance phase podcast, which is really great too. But that idea of like, what does it even mean to maintain recovery and how do we do that? What does that look like? What does it really even mean? And for each of you, I'm guessing it is probably similar and different. So I'm wondering for you guys, when you think about like, okay, how am I maintaining recovery? How do you feel like you're maintaining recovery?
I'll go. I'm like, who's gonna talk? For me, it's as simple as I don't have to be capable. I need to be willing. And every morning I wake up, and when I'm scared about all the things I have going on, I just and I say this to my husband as I'm yelling, I yell it at him as I like running out the door. I don't have to be capable. I have to be willing, you know, and that's how because I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for nobody else. You know, you know, I've gone through so much, and you know, it's for me. It's for and like the better I am, the better I can be for everybody else. And you know, not to lose sight of myself, or you know, to get down the rabbit hole of providing for everyone else. But you know, I'm just I'm a stronger, I'm a healthier, I'm a just more care. Everything about me thrives when I show up, and not because I feel I need to, but because I want to.
Love that, Maria. And so applicable. So many stages of I'm like, you are right. I don't have to be capable. I just have to be willing. Okay.
Really? Yeah, and it's so like yeah, and you can apply it to anything. It's just and like when you're nervous about you know a test or you know a job situation or you know meeting someone's friends for the first time or going to a dinner like anything like it's like do you want to be there, well then it will be good. If you don't want to go, then don't go. Like you know it's you know like an obligation, but you know it's just yeah it's such I just love it, and it's kind of like my mantra to start my day and to like honestly look at myself in the mirror and just say like okay, even if I'm tired or, you know, I'm not super happy with how my hair turned out or with the outfit I have, you know, it's just like, okay, like I'm doing it. I'm in it. Here we go. Like and again, it's just temporary. Like if there's a discomfort that is attached to it at that particular moment, or, you know, maybe you're feeling really good that day and you're just like, okay, when is this going to not feel as good? But yeah. So
That's beautiful. That's going to be my mantra from now on. Maria, that's amazing. Thank you. I need a new tattoo. Yeah, I think for me, it's just continuing to show up for myself and to make myself a priority every day. And there certainly are challenges to that. You know, I'm definitely like a sensitive person and empathetic, and so sometimes I can get lost in various situations and scenarios and people's own experiences. But I think for me, recovery is so much about, yeah, I mean, maybe it sounds a little bit basic, but just nurturing that love for myself every day, however that looks, and it's always different. But yeah, just having the willingness to put myself first, because no one else is gonna be there to like make sure that I'm showing up for myself. I'm lucky. My boyfriend is very considerate. You know, he will help me at times, and it's great to have people around you who reinforce that, you know, you take care of you, you do your thing. However, I am the one who's like truly responsible for myself in that way. And so reminding myself that every day and continuing to show up and be as me as possible in all of my relationships is another big part of recovery.
I love that.
I love that too. I think I'm taking mantras from both of you tonight. Um, from Maria, obviously, you don't have to be capable. You just have to be willing. From Eve, just do the next right thing. And I will leave you with one. Do it scared. I think for me, that is something that I took away from Renfrew that has really stuck with me. Like it doesn't have to feel comfortable, and you can still do it. Um, just making choices that feel like they are in line with your recovery and your values, even if you're kind of like, am I going to be judged for this? How's this going to go? Um, and picking things that kind of like heal that inner part of you that was broken um, pre-recovery or by the eating disorder. Like last year, I took a dance class, like for fun. And I was like terrified to go. And I did it anyway because it felt like that was the next right thing for me to do. And I did not have to be capable. I just had to be willing.
Thank you, Susan.
I love it. I want to thank you all so much. These are always some of my favorite events to host because it's so great to hear from alumni and to hear your stories and to hear how you've been able to stay connected with recovery and be able to create these lives that are the lives, you know, as providers, we always hope our clients are creating after they leave us. And to be able to share this story with alumni, I think is so meaningful. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank everyone who was here watching for joining us. And I hope we will see you all at our future events. And just once again, Maria, Eve, Susie, I want to thank you all so much for being here with me. Thank you.
Thank you.